Hey everyone, Lynn Fairchild Hawks here. We're going to take some moments to go over the task you just completed, which was the Socratic question review, determining whether or not any of the questions you looked at were actually Socratic. So this is your task as you design live session agendas, at least one per term, and also 3 asynchronous discussions, and creating Socratic questions that hopefully will go for miles. For the sake of our students, because we want them to go deep and really truly explore the big ideas of the discipline. And using this rubric is how we will judge the following questions you've already looked at. So this should be familiar to you, and I'll click right through it. And so should these 3 math questions. One is about mathematical problem solving, one's about strengthening monoalphabetic ciphers, and another is about the hacking scandal at Target. And if you did choose math, you can skip through the presentation to the next section if you like. But let's take a look at these 3 questions and see, are they actually Socratic? Can they go for miles? Well, the first one, what are the 5 steps for tackling mathematical problem solving? Use your textbook to provide an accurate list. Well, is it conceptual? Yes, there's a slight element of doubt. It's concise. It does require the use of a text resource, and it's a good introductory question that's building on content students have already mastered. What could we revise to truly make it Socratic? First, we want to increase the level of analysis, synthesis, or evaluation, those upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Right now, it's kind of a knowledge recall question. It's best for a didactic, interactive discussion. It's not truly Socratic. And we need to kind of clarify what kind of response students are going to give in terms of evidence. So look at the original question. Here's how we would revise it to make it more Socratic. Using the 5 steps for tackling problem solving, stated in your textbook, as a starting point, propose a problem-solving process that you think is the most effective. As you make your proposal, explain your reasoning, such as reasons for your sequence of steps, whether any steps might overlap and be renamed, and what new steps you would recommend and why. And note here that we have a suggestion about how students could craft some additional responses as an extension activity in an asynchronous discussion or just any follow-up activity. Also, with the other math question we had, which was the strengthening the monoalphabetic ciphers, that one is conceptual because it deals with strengths and standards for that. It's conceptual. There is some element of doubt, requires a little bit of analysis and evaluation, and it is concise. But we're not really sure what are the standards for cipher strength, and we hope that the instructor has clarified them somewhere, but this is a note to you if you're ever going to do an evaluation level question, which can be very Socratic. Where are those standards showing up, and how do you help students actually judge the cipher by those standards? We need to figure out how we want students to respond to this task, so we need a little more definition of that. And to be frank, this has more of a coaching element. It's not a didactic question. It's not a purely Socratic question, but it's more like, how can you fix? Kind of more of a skill practice thing. So there might be some answers that don't have a lot of debate. So here's how we would make this a little more robust and slightly more Socratic. In previous weeks, you identified numerous vulnerabilities of monoalphabetic ciphers, word lengths, double letters, letter frequencies, etc. With those weaknesses in mind, how can monoalphabetic ciphers be strengthened? In your response, identify both your proposals for strengthening, reasons it will address these vulnerabilities or weaknesses, and then if this were an asynchronous discussion, respond to at least 2 other proposals by asking questions, offering specific praise, or providing constructive criticism. And here's a follow-up. Why bother strengthening these types of ciphers? And this why question can get it even more Socratic, especially if you have a common text or video resource where someone is lecturing or discussing or analyzing how to strengthen these types of ciphers, and we can talk more with your student group about why are we doing this? Why does this matter? Why do we care? And you can all refer back to that same resource in order to discuss it. The final question is the target one, okay? And as we analyzed it here, it is a conceptual question with actually a very large element of doubt. It requires the use of text and resources, and it's relevant, meaningful to students. The problem is, though, it's too many questions, and we need to focus the question around one resource. Remember, if kids are not sharing one resource, we have a bit of a problem, because then the kids could all their different answers could be completely the same. I mean, different, based on multiple types of resources. And then we want to clarify the expectations for responses here. So notice that in the new version, that is slightly more Socratic, after reading A New Area of Hacking, Target, and Beyond, answer this question: why is cryptology our blessing and our curse? So you see how it refers the students back to the common shared resource, and it uses a why focusing question, very Socratic. Now, moving on, if you were interested in the English language arts questions, let's take a look at these and how these might get a little more Socratic. You had the ugly duckling one that had to do with bullying. We had a Shakespeare sonnet, and we also had a sources of conflict in short stories one. So let's take the ugly duckling one. Is it conceptual? Yeah. Is it personally relevant? Absolutely. Social emotional needs, bullying. Very on point for kids. But we need to increase the level of analysis, synthesis, or evaluation, and we need to bring in more of a text focus. Ironically, we're mentioning a short story here or a fable, but it's not really very intensively linked to that resource. The other thing is that we can keep the question personally relevant while avoiding very personal experience citation. And this is the danger when you ask kids to tell personal experiences in an academic conversation. You can very quickly go far afield. So we have to be very careful to not end up having a kid share a personal experience and that be somehow invalidated because it's not academic enough. So you kind of understand the context of walking that fine line there. And we can advise you both as staff and academic coordinators on this point if you have more questions. And of course, always good to clarify how you want the kids to respond to this in terms of the answer, especially when it's an open-ended answer. So here's our new version. Why do people bully? Using the ugly duckling as a source for analysis, identify reasons for this dark side of human behavior using terms from the 6 threads of characterization and terms such as motivation. So you see how we've pulled kids back to the academic content, back to one shared resource, and we are looking at human motivation, and we are distancing ourselves from kids' actual unique experiences, which are all valid, all unique perspectives, but they really can't be compared, can they, at the end of the day? So why should we do that? If we're not a counseling or therapy group, we're really not in the business of handling that, and it puts too much pressure on the instructor to do so. So let's look at here the Shakespeare question. Yeah, it's relevant, open-ended, it's very invitational, it's welcoming, it's diagnostic of what kids, what do you already know about sonnets? It's almost like a pre-test question. But we really need to ratchet up the level of analysis, synthesis, or evaluation. We need to integrate more text analysis. We got to move from the global, like, hey, what's your reaction, to a local question. And we got to clarify expectations for responses, and we really got to figure out what's the concept driving this. This is truly lacking a concept. So let's turn it to one of these two. You'll see that in the first one, we're saying, how do friends or lovers hurt one another? Let us count the ways. What is your reaction how Shakespeare describes cruelty? You see the concept there, and its effects in Sonnet 120. In your response, explore these 2 themes by explaining how any of the following techniques and imagery, etc., emphasize this vision of relationships Shakespeare presents. You can see the theme we're following here. Power is the concept that drives the second revised question. And so what we're trying to show you here is that now that this literature teacher has found the driving concept, now he or she can create a driving question that is more than just a general icebreaker question and now is becoming a truly rigorous academic question. The conflict question, it's an evaluation level question. How effectively are the conflicts resolved? Yeah, that's evaluation. It's rigorous. Right now, though, we don't really know what the shared resource is. There's multiple stories being looked at. We don't know what the resolution of an effective conflict looks like. Standard-wise, what's the rubric for that, okay? And we need to clarify that for kids, along with expectations for responses. So look at this revised question where we say, this week in your reading guide, you identified the sources of conflicts and types of conflict in each story you read. Let's look at Graham Greene's The Destructors. So there's actually 2 steps to this question. You got to choose the conflict, and you've got to use evidence to analyze how effectively the conflict is resolved. As you analyze, keep in mind you're creating standards for an effective resolution, ones that we will share in our next live session and that will focus your own story writing. So do you see how it's a shared rubric that kids are co-creating? Important step that needs to happen. You can create the rubric, or you can do it with your students. Now, let's move on to history and social sciences. Here we've got 2 questions. One is an American Dream question for a course we used to offer that has economics, finance, and psychology, very interdisciplinary class. And here we have a crime and justice question, legal question. So let's take a moment to actually go through the first question and see, is it conceptual? Yeah. Is it rigorous? Yeah, it's on a very high evaluative level. So right now the issue is that there are too many questions going on. We need to clarify them. Where are the kids going to focus? We also need to clarify the standards for evaluation. Need to pick a resource, and of course, as always, clarify expectations for responses. So how about this one? Thomas Jefferson proposed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as the American dream. If we take the first two propositions for granted, is the pursuit of happiness a benefit to Americans or a liability? Using one of the texts and videos we studied this week, make your case using any of our three lenses of finance, economics, or psychology. So what you can assume here is all the kids, this is a really great week 6 or 7 question, because you can assume that the kids are all kind of caught up on the texts and videos and everybody's shared them. And if they all have the same experience, you can use any of those to answer that. Now, we've got the legal question. Is it high level in terms of academic content? Yeah, it's analysis, evaluation. It's very text-based. There's an attached document, and it's even cool things. It's a role play. Students are thinking like defense attorneys. So great, wonderful, high level. Great for gifted kids. Now, this was a very long question, if you recall, in the original document. So we would suggest, first of all, you maybe separate some of the assignment into a separate place within Canvas, clarify expectations for responses, and maybe even diversify a little, maybe give some students a different role. Those are ways you could play around to make it slightly more clarified or Socratic. So the new version is, if you were Holmes's defense attorney, what would you argue to the jury to prove that he was insane? Be sure to make a claim as you've been directed in writing a trial brief, defend your claim with specific facts, and then, of course, visit other kids' posts. This is, of course, if it's an asynchronous discussion. We have a couple more here that you can look at very quickly. You can pause the presentation to read these in more depth, but we're going to run on to science now. Here are 3 questions that we could look at and see, are they truly Socratic? Let's take the nanomaterials one. Okay, great. There's a concept already, toxicity. It's meaningful, timely, relevant topic. How do we make it a higher level question? What's a text or resource to focus it? And of course, expectations for responses. New. Which nanomaterial shows the most evidence of toxicity and should be identified as a primary focus for further study and action to protect human health? So this is an argument. There's no perfect answer, right? Because there's different public health priorities, but we're getting kids to really step up and make an argument and make a choice. So there's an evaluative level here. And of course, now we're telling them what resources to use. Now we've got a global warming question, and is it analytical and evaluative? Yeah, it's open-ended. It welcomes students, very invitational, but we could probably reword it to make it more scientific and academic, clarify the standards for evaluation. Again, common texts. Remember, common are important. And of course, clarify expectations for responses. So take a look at this, and like the prior one you just looked at for nano, we got the same kind of theme here of really trying to get kids to make a clear argument, use evidence from shared and common resources. And of course, cultivate an awareness of other people's arguments to really help hone their own. Now we have a chemistry question, high level. It asks kids to look at the reading from the week, but we could clarify the locations of resources and clarify the expectations for responses. So it's pretty Socratic, and it's almost there. So just look at the slight tweaks we've made to this particular question. Note that we've also come up with a different way to phrase this. There is no perfect way. And as we believe in continuous improvement in these studies, you can always be tweaking your questions to make them more effective for your kids. And finally, you can take some time here to just click through and see some of the other questions and make sure, hey, are these inspirational for you to think about how you might come up with more Socratic questions? They might help you out as you're thinking about your own subject, whether it's science or not. And that concludes our presentation. Thanks for listening, and please let us know if we can help you, in particular academic coordinators, in refining your questions.